People gathered in the town square, excited for the highly anticipated new piece from travelling theatre group Nout Facts. The show, about to begin, was a sophisticated, rather highbrow true crime documentary about an ancient Scottish clan. Gradually, the excitable chatter quietened as the makeshift curtain rose and the cast steps forward holding their familiar opening sign, the iconic opener for every Nout Facts production. A voice echoing from the stage. Several moons ago, the polite, placid community of Ballantrae was devastated by a series of heinous crimes. Little did the genteels of this quaint town know the danger that decimated their accepting and morally correct way of life came from within. For a man named Sawney Bean walked among us. He looked like any decent lad, but he had a dark secret. A young man in rags came forward, frowning as he calls out to the audience. This man, like any other man amongst us here, was unfulfilled by life and therefore susceptible to the witchcraft of a woman named Agnes. The locals knew Agnes to be a witch and therefore asked her as kindly as they could to cease her wicked ways. The crowd gasps and shakes in horror, muttering amongst themselves as Agnes appears alongside Sawney. But this was just the beginning. Beguiled and mesmerised, Sawney lost charge of his senses and abandoned his dutiful life to marry Agnes, and under the instruction of the hideous concubine of Satan, his wife, Sawney turned to a life of crime. Then townsfolk began to go missing in mysterious circumstances. Sawney declared his love for Agnes, enslaved by her unholy magic. "I love your eyes," he cried to her. Agnes then looks lovingly at Sawney and confesses, "I love eating eyes." It was shortly after this confession a classic romantic love story turned into a repugnant act of cannibalism, the narrator revealed. In their years of hiding, they accumulated many children who also began to exhibit cannibalistic tendencies. However, no sightings of the ever-expanding clan were reported until one fateful night. It is said a couple departing from this very town square were attacked by the clan. But the heroic man escaped, reporting back to our great king. This fearless hero, like a messenger from God himself, rushed to the king and recounted what had happened. As the heroic traveller described the gory details of the attack, the king's personal artist tried his best to create depictions of each clan member. Here we can see those very same images of the clan members, paintings described in detail and integral to the following investigation. The cast members hold up countless images of the clan. The king's private detective showed off his entire crime scene wall he had been working on for the past 25 years, documenting the thousands of missing people. The crowd looked at each other in confusion. Thousands are the number of stone tiles on this very square. The crowd expressed a collective, "Ah." The king's personal bloodhounds managed to follow the scent of rotting corpses until they uncover the Bean's lair, and finally troops stormed the cave to capture all members of the clan. A cheer rises proudly from the audience. The troops rounded up the entire clan like the animals they were, sent to be tortured and killed without trial. For the evidence was so reeky it could be sniffed miles away even without bloodhounds. Sawney and Agnes lie on the stage covered in ketchup, with Sawney shouting out, "It isn't over, me love. It'll never be over." So the town of Ballantrae could sleep again. Someone shouts from the crowd, "Agnes corrupted Sawney." Another, "It was that witch that made the devil's work. Sawney should have been excused for his crimes," jeered a third. The crowd nods in agreement. For hundreds of years, audiences were and are bewitched by true crimes. From the penny dreadful to documentaries and mini-series available on many a streaming service, audiences hunger for a taste of murder and depravity. The first bestsellers from the printing press were indeed manifestos against the perils of witchcraft, misogynistic propaganda that enabled the slaying of thousands, innocent women who became victims of accusation or by hearsay alone. Recently, we have started to question how ethical our consumption of the most horrendous crime media truly is. When covering sensitive cases such as murders and disappearances, the journalism and production ethos never truly have good intentions or the victim's best interests at heart. The popularity online has cultivated a massive following, with fans of crime documentaries, series and podcasts seeing gruesome, traumatising stories as light-hearted bedtime fodder. These have even spawned merchandising opportunities with serial killer colouring books and other media products that glorify the most hideous of acts. Curiosity surrounding these crimes and the perpetrators often leads to romanticism, which completely belittles the real horror, or even justifies it in some cases. Even more recent murders are treated as news items for sordid gossip mongers who are disrespectful to victims and relatives alike. Both journalists and audience care naught for the dignity and kindness so vital in the aftermath of such trauma. Hatred and sadistic remarks are levelled at those who least deserve it. And, despite our now knowing how unforgivable the treatment of women was, over centuries, those poor scapegoats accused of witchcraft, people still looked to the act of demonising minority, marginalised, disenfranchised communities and people, using a single example of a serial killer to tarnish the reputation of everybody in a community, or simply to say it was their own fault, for if they'd not been so whatever they were, or done whatever they did, they would not have been murdered in the first place. So next time you find yourself poring over the latest scandal, or consuming the body parts of some terrible crime, remember who is actually accountable here, and just how much leverage are you placing on the murderer's blade. This man, like any other amongst us here, was fulfilled by life. This man, like any other man amongst us here, was unfulfilled by life. This man, this man, this man. The locals knew Agnes to be a witch, and they asked her as kindly as they could to cease her wicked ways. this man, this man, this man, like this man, this man, like any other man amongst us here, was unfulfilled by life and therefore susceptible to witchcraft. This man, like any other man here, was unfulfilled by life and therefore susceptible to the witchcraft of women